I had always considered myself a good person, a good wife, a good mother. Mark and I had been together for over 10 years, and for most of that time things were, well, they were fine. We were comfortable. We had our routines, our quiet moments, our family. But as time went on, something started to shift inside me, something I didn't know how to name at first. A longing, a dull ache. I'd been feeling it for months, maybe even longer. It wasn't that I didn't love Mark. I did. But love sometimes feels like a cozy blanket. You know it's there, but sometimes it's just not enough to keep you warm. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was just tired. Maybe it was the pressure of raising a child, of balancing work and life. I convinced myself it was just a phase. But when you feel invisible long enough, it starts to gnaw at you, and no matter how hard you try to push it away, it creeps back into your thoughts, and that's when I met him. Ryan. It started innocently enough, just a few casual texts here and there. He was someone I met through a mutual friend, and the conversation quickly turned into something more than I had expected. At first, I told myself it was harmless. We'd talk about work, about life, about whatever. But as time passed, the messages became more frequent, more personal. He made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Every text from him was like a little spark, a reminder that there was still something inside of me worth feeling. And then, one day, we went for drinks. Just the two of us. I had never intended for it to go any further, but I knew when we sat down across from each other that this was different. There was something in his eyes, something in the way he looked at me that made me feel like I wasn't just a wife or a mother or a colleague. I was just me. I felt seen, for the first time in a long time. I told myself I wasn't going to let it happen. I was better than that. But we talked late into the night, laughing and sharing things I hadn't shared with anyone in ages. And before I knew it, the line between friendship and something more had blurred. The next time we met, it was no longer just drinks. It was dinner. And after that, it was more. I didn't know when it happened, but the moment I let him kiss me, everything changed. The guilt hit me like a wave, but I pushed it down. I told myself it didn't matter. Mark would never know. I justified it by thinking, I'm not leaving him, I don't even know what I was telling myself. I was just looking for something that was missing, and Ryan made me feel desired in a way that Mark hadn't in years. We kept it a secret. I told myself it was just an affair, a temporary thing. But it didn't feel temporary. It felt like I had found something I had been desperately searching for. And every time I returned home to Mark, to our life, it felt like I was wearing a mask. I wasn't being myself anymore. I was playing a part. But the guilt didn't disappear. It followed me, haunting me in every moment. I couldn't look Mark in the eye without feeling like a fraud. Every time he kissed me, every time we had sex, I felt like I was betraying him. But the part of me that wanted to feel alive, that wanted to feel seen, was winning. I kept pushing the guilt aside, pretending everything was fine. I knew it couldn't last forever. The weight of the secret was becoming too heavy to carry, but there was always something that kept me from coming clean. Fear. Fear of losing Mark, fear of what would happen to our family, fear of the consequences. And so, I kept it going, kept pretending that everything was normal. Until today. It had started like any other morning. Mark and Jake left for their usual routine. Mark had an appointment for his knee therapy, and Jake was going with him for a little trip to the park afterward. I kissed them both goodbye, pretending everything was okay. Mark didn't seem to suspect anything, or at least he didn't let on. I was careful, so careful not to let anything slip. But today was different. Today Ryan was coming over. I had invited him over when I knew I would have the house to myself for a few hours. I had told myself this was the last time. The final time I would let myself get caught up in this. I couldn't keep living this double life, and I knew that. But when Ryan arrived, when he kissed me again, everything else seemed to vanish. All the guilt, all the fears, they disappeared the moment he touched me. And for that short time, I was no longer a wife or a mother. I was just a woman, living in the moment, feeling something real. I knew it was a mistake. But I couldn't stop. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have predicted, was that today would be the day Mark and Jake would come home early. They had planned to be gone for hours, but for some reason, they came back earlier than expected. I heard the door open, the sound of footsteps echoing in the hallway. My heart skipped a beat, my stomach dropped into my throat. I froze. Mark's voice rang out, cheerful. Surprise. Babe. We thought we'd come home early and make it a family day. I turned around in a panic. And there he was, standing in the doorway with Jake by his side, both of them frozen in shock. Mark's eyes immediately flicked between Ryan and me. He didn't say anything at first, but I could see the confusion, the hurt in his eyes. My heart broke all over again. I couldn't even move, couldn't breathe. Time seemed to stand still in that moment, as if the universe was holding its breath. And in the silence, I knew everything had just changed. Everything froze for a moment. Mark's eyes were wide, staring at me as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Jake was standing there, holding his little toy, blissfully unaware of the storm swirling around us. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, each beat louder than the last. My mouth went dry, and the air felt thick with tension. Mark didn't speak at first, just stood there, looking between Ryan and me, his face unreadable. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. My body was paralyzed, as if I had no control over it anymore. Finally, Mark cleared his throat, his voice tight. "What's going on here?" His words hung in the air, cold and sharp. I could hear the tremor in his voice, the hurt that was beginning to bleed through. I stood there frozen, unable to make sense of the situation. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I had imagined 100 different scenarios in my head, but none of them had been like this. I'd told myself I could keep everything under control, that I could manage this secret without anyone ever finding out. But here we were, and Mark was looking at me like I was a stranger. Ryan, who had been standing there awkwardly, cleared his throat and shifted, trying to make himself look less out of place. "I think it's best if I go," he said softly. He was trying to be polite, but it didn't matter. The damage had already been done. I wanted to stop him, to beg him not to leave, to say something to Mark, anything to explain, but I couldn't. I was too ashamed. My body felt numb. I didn't even know where to begin. Ryan walked past Mark, his face flushed, and left through the front door. The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear the sound of Jake's toy hitting the floor, his confused little voice asking, "Daddy, what's wrong?" Mark didn't respond to Jake right away. He stood there for a long moment, his back turned to me as he tried to process what had just happened. I could see his shoulders tense, his jaw clenching. I couldn't read him anymore. I didn't know if he was angry, hurt, or just in shock. Maybe all of it. "Mark," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I didn't mean for this to happen. His eyes snapped to me, and I saw the anger and the pain flash across his face. "Didn't mean for what to happen, Sarah." His voice was low, controlled, but I could see the way his hands were trembling at his sides. "What the hell is this?" I wanted to explain, wanted to tell him everything, but I couldn't. I was too terrified. Terrified of losing him, terrified of what he would think of me. How could I explain this? How could I explain the emptiness I had felt, the way I had let myself fall into this mess? I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My throat was dry, my mind racing. How could I make him understand? "You've been seeing him for how long?" Mark asked, his voice suddenly sharp, the words cutting through me like a knife. "How long has this been going on, Sarah?" The question hung in the air like a heavy weight, and I felt the walls closing in around me. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I could even give him a real answer. I didn't want to hurt you, Mark," I said, my voice shaking. I was lost. I didn't know what to do." Mark's expression hardened, and he shook his head. "Lost." His voice cracked, and I could see the frustration boiling beneath the surface. "You think this is just about being lost. You think this is some kind of mistake. You've been lying to me, lying to our son. I trusted you. I trusted you with everything. I didn't know what to say to that." He was right. I had lied. I had been deceitful, hiding this part of myself from him, from our family. I had betrayed everything we had built together, and now I had to live with the consequences. Jake looked between the two of us, sensing the tension in the room. His small voice broke through the thick silence. "Mummy, why is Daddy mad? Why is Ryan gone?" I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of it all. How could I explain this to him? How could I explain it to anyone? Mark turned to Jake, his face softening, but there was still a hard edge to his features. Jake, sweetheart, why don't you go to your room for a little while? Mommy and I need to talk. Jakey didn't seem to fully understand, but he nodded and walked slowly down the hallway, still clutching his toy. I watched him go, my heart breaking for him. He didn't deserve any of this. He shouldn't have to see this mess. But I had created it. I had ruined the trust we had built as a family. Once Jake was out of earshot, Mark turned back to me. His voice was barely above a whisper now, but it was filled with pain. How long, Sarah? How long has this been going on? I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to admit it, but I knew I had to. Since last summer, I said, my voice trembling. It started with just texting, and then it went further. The words felt like they were being ripped from me, each one more painful than the last. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Mark closed his eyes, his hand gripping the back of the couch, as if he was holding on to something for support. I could see the pain in his face, but I also saw the hurt, the betrayal. I don't even know who you are anymore, he said quietly. I thought we were building a life together, and now this. I felt like my entire world was crumbling around me. The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same. I stood there, feeling like the walls were closing in around me. Mark's words hung in the air, cutting deeper than I ever thought they could. The way he looked at me, like he didn't even know who I was anymore, was a blow I hadn't prepared for. I had always thought we had something strong, something unshakable. But now, it felt like it was all slipping through my fingers. I wanted to reach out, to comfort him somehow, but I knew it was too late for that. My actions had already set everything in motion. There was no going back. I don't know what you want me to say, Mark, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what I can say that will make this right. Mark's jaw tightened, and he shook his head as if trying to get a grip on himself. You don't get it, do you? It's not about what you say anymore. It's about what you've done, and how long you've been doing it. His voice cracked, but he quickly regained his composure. You've betrayed me. You've betrayed our family. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg him to understand, to beg him to see how lost I had felt, how desperate I had been for something, anything, that would make me feel alive again. But the truth was, I couldn't take back what I had done. I couldn't undo the damage, and no amount of explaining or apologizing would change that. I never wanted to hurt you, Mark. You have to believe that. I never wanted to hurt our family. My voice broke as I spoke. I thought I could handle it, that it wouldn't matter. But I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Mark looked at me, his eyes cold and distant. Sorry doesn't fix this, Sarah. Sorry doesn't change what you've done. The silence between us was suffocating. It felt like I couldn't breathe. It was a suffocating mix of guilt and grief, and every second felt like a slow suffocation. I don't even know what to say to Jake. Mark muttered, more to himself than to me. How do I explain this to him? How do I look him in the eye after this? I wanted to tell him I didn't know, that I didn't know how to fix any of it. But I couldn't. I've broken everything, haven't I? I said, my voice barely a whisper. I've ruined us. I don't deserve you. I don't deserve him. And Mark turned away from me, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this, Sarah. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I don't know if I can look at you the same way. His voice trembled. How could you do this to me? To us? To our son? I felt the weight of his words like a punch to the gut. He was right. I had destroyed something so precious. All of it. The trust, the love, the life we had built together. It was gone now, scattered in pieces that I couldn't put back together. I never wanted any of this to happen. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was practically pleading now. I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want to lose everything we had. Mark didn't respond immediately. He was staring at the floor. His face contorted in pain, as if trying to process everything that had just come crashing down on him. I could feel the distance between us growing wider and wider, and it felt like there was nothing I could do to close it. I don't know if I can forgive you, he finally said, his voice strained. I need time. I need space. I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. I understand. I'll give you all the space you need. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but if there's any chance, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll do whatever you need me to do. Mark didn't respond. He just stood there for a moment longer, his gaze still fixed on the floor. Then, without saying another word, he turned and walked out of the room. I didn't move, didn't follow him. I couldn't. I was paralyzed by guilt, by the weight of my mistakes. I had ruined everything, and now there was no way to undo it. A few minutes later, I heard Mark talking to Jake in the other room, trying to explain what had happened in the most basic way possible, trying to reassure him that everything would be okay. But I knew it wouldn't be. I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. I sat down on the couch, my hands trembling in my lap. I had no idea what the future held. What would happen to our family? What would happen to Mark and me? Could we ever rebuild? Or was it all too far gone? I thought about Ryan then, about how I had let myself fall into this affair, how I had betrayed the one person who had always been there for me. I had used him to fill a void inside me that I should have been filling on my own. Ryan had been a distraction, a temporary escape from a life that felt suffocating. But now that it was over, now that the truth was out, I realized that it wasn't just Mark who had been hurt. I had hurt myself too. I had let myself become someone I didn't recognize, someone I was ashamed of, and the worst part was, I didn't know how to fix any of it. The next few days felt like I was walking through a fog. The house felt emptier, quieter than it ever had before. Mark and I barely spoke, only when necessary, and every word felt like a knife. We were strangers now, and it hurt more than I could put into words. Jake didn't fully understand what had happened, thank God, but I could see the confusion in his eyes when he looked at me. He could sense the tension, the unspoken things between us. And it tore me apart. He didn't deserve any of this. None of it. I spent my days in a haze, replaying the events over and over in my mind. I thought about Ryan too, about the life I had built with him, the fantasies I had created. But all of that seemed meaningless now. Ryan had become just another casualty in the mess I had made of my life. And I knew he had to move on, just as I had to. Mark wasn't ready to talk about it, and I didn't expect him to be. He had every right to be angry, to be hurt. I had broken his trust, and no amount of apologies could undo that. All I could do now was wait for him to decide what he wanted. If he wanted anything from me at all. I didn't know if our marriage would survive this. I didn't know if I even deserved for it to. But I was going to try. I had to. Because no matter what happened, I knew one thing for sure. I had destroyed something precious. And now all I could do was try to pick up the pieces, one by one, and hope that somehow I could rebuild.